Well, thank you. Thank you. Please, please have a seat. Rosemary, thank you very, very much for that very generous introduction. My name's Joe Biden. I am Jill Biden's husband and Jean Finnegan's son. I'm from 2446 North Washington Avenue, and I'm happy to be home. Happy to be home. No, it really is. It really is good to be home. You know, it's presumptuous for me to say home, I know. But, you know, Scranton, when you're a kid, no matter how long you live here, climbs into your heart and it occupies you. So many people you know are from Scranton. So many people from Scranton. And so many people, great people here. My mother, Catherine Eugenia Finnegan Biden, on North Washington Avenue, St. Paul's, Marywood, raised in Scranton. First 35 years of her life before we moved to Delaware. She lived to age 92, thank God. And the last 10 years of her life, she's lived with me. And, you know, after my dad passed, she moved in. But it was a struggle to get her to move in with us because when I was growing up in Delaware in our three-bedroom split-level home, for most of my career, my life, we always had a relative living with us, either my grandpop or my great-aunt or an uncle. There's always someone in our three-bedroom split-level home with 4 kids and mom and dad. It was great for the kids. It really was. It was great having Pop with us, my grandpop, and so on. But the fact of the matter was that my mother, looking back on it, those walls were pretty thin. So after my dad passed away, I tried to get Mom to move in with me in a home that we had just built. I built a suite for my mom and dad, but my dad was in hospice the last 5 months of his life at our home, but my mom wouldn't move in because she said she wasn't going to, quote, do that to me. But I said, Mom, you're not doing that to me. You're doing it for us. She didn't want to be burdened. But that's how my sister and brothers were raised. We were raised, taught that it's all about family, and family is no burden. Even then, she wouldn't actually move into our house. She sold her house and asked me to build. There was a little barn on the property I'd bought, 5 acres I'd purchased. She wanted me to build her a house there. But at least I got every night I'd come home, get to kiss her goodnight. My wife, Jill, was a great friend of hers, and she'd say, "You've been with your mother, I can smell ice cream." And I got to kiss her good morning as I headed to the train. But that satisfied her pride and gave the whole family solace. Everything my sister Valerie and I learned came from Scranton. Scranton sort of, as I said, creeps into your heart and never leaves you. When people would ask my mom after she had been in Delaware, this is not any exaggeration, over 50 years, where she lives, where she's from, when she was out of Wilmington, she'd say, "I'm from Scranton. I'm from Scranton." Not a joke. She and my dad passed along those values that Scranton families are all about. She used to say, "Joe, remember, this is God's truth, remember, you're defined by your courage and you're redeemed by your loyalty." That was my grandfather, Ambrose Finnegan. It was all about courage. She said, "Joey, courage is the greatest virtue of all. Because without courage, you can't love with abandon." That's what I learned. I learned it here. And I suspect most of you learned the same things here in Scranton. My dad moved here with his father and mother, moved to Dunmore when he was a senior in high school, went to St. Thomas's, now Prep. And all my extended family is here as well, including some of my relatives that are here today, the Finnegans, the Gaffneys. Maybe the most important thing my father taught me was that raised in the same tradition that I found everybody that I grew up with here and stayed in contact with here over my career. Everybody has the same notion. Every single person, my dad used to say, no matter who they are, Joey, is entitled to be treated with dignity. Dignity. a word I think that is probably used more here in Scranton, at least in my experience, than anywhere else. It's all about dignity. No matter what your station in life is, no matter what your background is, everybody's entitled to be treated with dignity. My dad was a real gentleman, and he would tell you, Joey, remember, you have to be, and he'd say the same to my sister, only he'd say a woman. He'd say, Joey, you have to be a man of your word. Without your word, you're not a man. It's about honor. No, I really mean it. It's about honor, and it's about family. I learned that at my grandpa's kitchen table here in Greenwich. Not a joke. You know, he'd say, Joey, family's the beginning, the middle, and the end. The older I got, the more I learned to admire my dad's courage and resilience. When Scranton fell on hard times in the late 40s and early 50s, my dad, who, if you listen to Barack, he always talks about Scrappy Joe Biden from Scranton. Well, you know, people in Delaware resent the hell out of that because I represented them for over 40 years. But matter of fact, I was in a parade in a little town called Hocassin. When my son passed away, one of the favorite parades the kids would go to with me. And I'm walking down the parade route and thanking them for being good to my boy. And three guys looking like you that I played ball with in school came running up behind me and said, Joe, what the hell's all this about Scranton? God damn, you're from Delaware. You're from Delaware. But my dad, like I said, if you listen to Barack, you'd think I climbed out of a coal mine with a lunch bucket heading out. But my dad was a white-collar salesperson, but there was not a lot of work up here then in the early 50s. And I remember him making what I call the longest walk, and some of you have had to make and some of your family members had to make. The longest walk up a short flight of stairs to your child's bedroom and tell them, honey, you can't play in the Greenwich Little League anymore. You can't go back to school because Dad doesn't have a job. Dad's got to move. We can't. Everything's going to change. And I remember Dad doing that. As a matter of fact, I went literally back to my ancestral home up there. The woman who owns it's been a lovely, lovely person and become a friend. She still is a person who bought it from my grandpa when they died. And it just brings back memories. He came up and he said, I'm going to have to move, honey. But I'm going to come home. It's only 157 miles away because he had been raised in Wilmington up until he was a junior in high school. And so only 157 miles away, and I'm home every weekend. I remember thinking that was like going to the moon, 157 miles, you know, and he did. But it wasn't until I got a lot older I realized how much it must have affected his pride, having to walk into the kitchen of my Grandpa Finnegan, who had 4 sons, and say, you know, can I leave Gene and the kids here with you? I promise I'll pay you back. I'll be back. I promise. Can you do it? It wasn't a second thought from my grandpa, but it takes a lot of pride for a man or a woman to do that and say, can you take care of things? Can you do something for me? And you know, although it was hard for him, I didn't think it was hard for my grandpa because, again, it's family. And, you know, I've had nothing but great memories about Scranton. Climbing what used to be that 10-foot stone wall of Marywood, having apple fights behind the wall, climbing the flagpole in Maloney Field. I might say the only kid who went to the top. In my generation, being, you know, that penny candy at a place called Simmy's is no longer Simmy's and Papsy's, and going down to the Roosevelt and Greenwich corners for the matinees, and then playing out the matinee on the way home, trying to walk across that pipe across the Lackey. You know, because that's what the heroes did, you know, sometimes falling in. But, you know, they're nothing but good memories. But more than the memories, what I remember most as I think about it as I get older is the values that were instilled in me up here. The point of all this, as I look back on it, is that this is where I learned about loyalty. This is where I learned about patriotism. This is where I learned about what friendship means. So I learned about family and faith. Faith that helped me get through a lot of tough times in my life. And a lot of you have been through tougher times than I have. You know, as the philosopher Kierkegaard said, faith sees best in the dark. Faith sees best in the dark. Well, we all go through dark times. Because of the faith that was instilled in me here, we've been able to traverse it. When my dad made that walk up the stairs, he told me, honey, everything's going to be okay. Once we get settled in Delaware, we're all going to come down and be together. And it was. My dad then, in the mid-50s, believed everything was going to be okay because the middle class still had a fighting chance then. And it became okay. We moved to a little steel town called Claymont, Delaware. That is no longer a steel town. We rented apartments for several years. We finally got to move into a suburban neighborhood not far from there in suburban Wilmington, when the developments were like the Levittown kind of developments were being developed, a 3-bedroom split-level house that was in a safe neighborhood and with 4 kids and, as I said, a relative. But, you know, from the time we were old enough to listen, every time someone, a relative in Delaware or a friend, lost a job or a neighbor lost a job because of a recession or because of a company went under, my dad used to say, and I give him my word to this, he'd say, Joey, remember, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about your place in the community. It's about who you are. It's about being able to look your child in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. Well, that's how we were raised. And my guess is that's how the bulk of you were raised here in Scranton and Wilkes-Barre area. We were raised to believe family, loyalty, treating everyone with dignity is what we should do. Because a lot of us knew what it was like not to be treated with dignity by people with wealth and people who somehow thought that we weren't quite their equals. I can hear her now, my mom. I used to stutter badly when I was a kid. Mom saying, remember, Joey, nobody's better than you, but everybody's your equal. My dad would say, not a joke, he'd say, Joey, the measure of success is not whether or not you get knocked down, it's how quickly you get up. So get the hell up, man. Get up. Get up. Really. My dad, as he got older, if I wanted to take you over to meet my dad, he'd be angry if I didn't call him because he'd make sure he had to have a sport coat on to meet you, not to be in his sweats. He wanted to greet you at his home. My dad was very, thought manners to my dad were a big, big deal. One day he was over at our house, a house that I had built, and I guess I was looking out over this little pond that's on in Delaware. And I guess I was kind of feeling sorry for myself. I was talking about my deceased wife, and he said, Joey, he said, come on. And he left and went up to the Hallmark store and came back, and I have it on my desk to this day. A cartoon, you know, you can go in those stores and get a little glass rectangular case with a cartoon or a saying or something on it. And he came back and he gave me this cartoon, and I have it now, and it sits on my desk, and it's been there for over 25 years. That's not true, 19 years. And it says, I'm not a big funny paper guy, but my dad was, and there's a cartoon character used to be called Hagar the Horrible. It was the Viking. And there's 2 frames in this picture. And again, it reminds me of the resilience of the people in Scranton and Claymont, where I'm from. It's a picture of Hagar, and his Viking ship has crashed onto the rocks. And the mast is down, and he's standing, he has his hand, he's shaking his fist to heaven, he's saying, why me, God? And the voice from heaven, the next, same exact scene, with his hand up, and a voice from heaven says, why not? Why not you? Why not you? Well, folks, a lot of people here in Scranton, all across America, have over the last decades, and even now, had to make that longest walk. But today, too many middle class and working class folks can't look their kids in the eye any longer and say it's going to be okay and mean it. That's why I'm running. I'm running to rebuild the backbone of this country. The backbone of this country is the middle class. you know, and this time, we have to bring everybody along, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, your gender, your disability. Everybody's got to come along. Because, folks, let's get something straight. Wall Street did not build America. Investment bankers did not build America. Hard-working middle-class people built America. Unions built the middle class. And the middle class built this country. And all this talk, I got asked yesterday, I did an interview for 60 Minutes that's going to be coming on. 60 Minutes for 90 minutes. And they asked me about, well, aren't things well? Unemployment's down to 3.5%. I said, go back to your old neighborhoods. Ask them how they're doing, how they're feeling. They're in trouble. There used to be a basic bargain in America that if you contribute to the well-being of the outfit you work with, you got to share in the benefits. Well, that bargain's been broken. Corporate America's been doing incredibly well for the last 15 years. Their profits have come up exponentially. It used to be there was a direct relationship between so-called productivity, how much more got put out on a factory floor or out of a corporation, and salary. From the end of World War II to the end of the 70s, productivity went up over 90-some%, 94 I think it was. Wages went up 95%. Since then, productivity has gone up 68 or 69%. Wages 8%. What happened? What happened to that bargain? It's not happening anymore. Studies show that middle-class families have difficulty making. They're losing hope. Half of them think their children will never be in a situation as good or better off than they were. You were all raised to believe that if you worked better, you worked hard, you could even be better off than your parents. But not today. They don't believe it. Studies show that if you have an unexpected expense during a month of $400 or more, you can't pay it. You got to either borrow the money or sell something. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to rebuild the middle class. And let me explain what I mean by middle class. You know, I have a lot of economists work for me. They'll tell you middle class is 51,800 or 52,000. Middle class is a value set. Middle class is being able to send your child to a park and you know they're going to come home safely. Being able to send them to the local public school that you know if they do well, they'll be able to go beyond school. They'll be able to get a degree. They'll be able to get, no, really. And knowing if they get in, you can find a way to pay for it. Middle class is being able to take your geriatric mom home when dad dies and hope your children never have to take care of you. That's middle class. Just a little bit of breathing room. And it's hard for a family today to maintain their dignity if they don't have health care. I can't imagine turning to your child who has a pre-existing condition and say, sorry, kid, nothing I can do for you. I can't help you. Look, in saying insurance, look, I can't imagine what it would be like for people. And many of you know it, and many of you have been through it. How many of you, raise your hand if you lost someone to cancer or cancer yourself? How many of you lost a close family member, a son, a daughter, a husband, or a wife? I can't imagine what it would have been like when my son Bo, a decorated veteran, a major in the United States Army, volunteered to go, the Attorney General of the state of Delaware volunteered to go to Iraq, and he was there for a year. Bronze Star, Conspicuous Service Medal, and many other honors. Comes home and he gets diagnosed with terminal cancer. I can't imagine lying in that bed toward the end if the insurance company could have come in and said to him, I'm sorry, pal, you've run out of your coverage. Suffer in peace the next 3 or 4 months as long as you live. Can't fathom it. How can a family maintain their dignity if they don't? They have a child who has some talent and wants to go beyond high school. And they look at him and they can't get there. My dad, when we got to Delaware, the first good job he was able to get after several years, he ended up being a manager of an automobile dealership. Great thing about that is that you always get a new car for the prom. I remember going down after a baseball game. The dealership he ran was down where the university is, Newark, and we lived about 25 minutes from there. And I went to a school in Claymont at the time, high school. And I remember going down in my baseball uniform, racing down in a 51 Plymouth convertible with a ripped top and beach towels for seat covers. And I park it in the one spot, and I ran in and asked his secretary, Mary, where's Dad? Because I was going to get a car to go to the senior prom. And she said, he's out in the alley, honey, going into the shop. I walked out, and my dad was pacing back and forth. True story. He looked up at me and said, Joey. He said, oh, Joey. He said, I'm so sorry. I'm so damn sorry. This is before cell phones or anything. I thought maybe something happened to one of my two brothers or sister and my mom. I said, what's the matter, Dad? He said, I went to the bank that financed all the car loans they had. I spoke to Charlie, the guy, the vice president, Charlie Delcher. He said, I spoke to Charlie. Honey, they won't lend me the money to get you to college. I'm so damn ashamed. I'm ashamed. Why in the hell should he be ashamed? How many people sat at the kitchen table today and had the conversation saying, you know, we got to drive on those 4 tires for another 10,000 miles. We can't afford a new set of tires this month. We got to wait. Or who's going to tell her she can't go back? We just don't have the money. What are we going to do about that insurance? This administration has no idea what hard-working, decent, ordinary Americans are going through. You know, a parent, how many of you, either grandpops or grandmoms or moms or dads, dropped off your child or grandchild the first day of school there in preschool or first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, knowing around America they were going to have to learn how to duck and cover, building schools, telling kids the way you get behind this pillar here if someone comes in. You know the greatest concern, I spoke to the International Psychiatric Association and the American Psychiatric Association in London. You know the generation that has the greatest degree of anxiety of any generation in America? Kids between 7 and 20 years old. You know what their greatest fear is? Being shot in school. No, not a joke. Being shot in school. You saw all the pictures of going back to school about kids, about the new schools we're building. And that's all because we don't have the nerve to take on the damn NRA and the gun manufacturers. There's no need. Folks, there's no need for this. Some of you are hunters. I've got shotguns. My sons are hunters, mainly geese. You know, if you go out and hunt for geese, you're not allowed to have in your shotgun more than 3 shells. Protect the geese. We have federal laws that protect geese more than, think about it. Why in God's name should anyone be able to have a clip that holds 100 rounds? So folks, the administration keeps doing the bidding of the NRA and the gun manufacturers. You know, I'm not against the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment says it's not absolute. If this is my friends in the far right talk about the tree of liberty is watered with the blood of patriots. You got to be able to fight against the government. Well, guess what? You need an M1 tank, man. You need an F-15. You need some Hellfire missiles. But you can't have them. You can't have bazookas. You can't have machine guns. We've never argued there are certain weapons that people can't own. There's never been a time in the history of the Second Amendment when we've said anybody can own a weapon. Anybody. Folks, how can a parent feel good about raising a child in a neighborhood where the groundwater is polluted because the oil company is polluting it? Or whether or not the groundwater pipes are made of wood or they're put in 1960 and no longer are safe? How many schools around the country know, for all I know here in Lackawanna and Luzerne counties, the water in the schools is not safe. Look, we all want the same thing. A fair shot, a life of dignity, and the peace of mind when someone gets sick. You have a little breathing room when the bill comes through. A shot for a better future. With all due respect, and I've never talked about a president like this before, I don't think Donald Trump is capable of understanding that. He doesn't seem to have any sense of empathy at all for people. I've not seen it, if it exists, unlike any other president that I've ever worked with. And folks, you know, I'm not sure Donald Trump has any idea what I'm talking about when I talk about the longest walk. You know, I think that the longest walk his father ever made was to drop off $400 million in his trust account. It's okay. I'd like to have had that problem. But look, let me tell you why I'm running. First, I'm thinking about health care. 9 years ago, we fought like hell to get Obamacare passed. Generations have tried to do that. But we got it done. Health care is more than just a luxury reserved to those who can afford it. It's a right. It's a right we all deserve. It's central to our dignity and who we want to be as a country. One of my proudest moments in those 8 years was standing along President Obama and getting it done. Generations of Americans have fought to make that promise real. It was a really big deal. A really big deal. I wish I hadn't whispered that in the president's ear. Thank God my mother wasn't around. But look, the law has saved lives. It saved lives. It's kept families out of bankruptcy. We knew it wasn't perfect when we fought hammer and tong to get it passed. We wanted to do more, but we got as much as we could get done, and it was important. We put 20 million people on the rolls. 160 million people had pre-existing conditions covered. You know, but we didn't. We have to finish the job to ensure that every single American has a choice to be covered by a public option. Under my plan, you're free to stick with the insurance you have if you negotiate it with your company and you like it. And a lot of you had gone through long negotiations, given up pay raises in order to get thorough coverage. Under my plan, you get to keep it. But if you don't like it, or if you're uninsured, you get to sign up to a public option, a Medicare-like proposal. My plan reduces premiums, deductibles, out-of-pocket costs, increasing subsidies for middle-class families to buy in. And for the first time, it will force private insurance to compete with your business, not just with each other, but with a public competitor. And it isn't in it to make it a profit. That's what the Medicare-like option provides. It's going to keep premiums even lower. Bottom line is, my health care plan is the fastest, most effective way to reduce costs for Americans, give everybody affordable quality health insurance, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, but right now. And we can afford it. The second thing, we have to rebuild our education system, as was stated at the very end, beginning by Rosemary. You know, my wife, who's taught her whole life, is teaching at this moment. And that's why she's not up here with me. She's going to Iowa tomorrow, but she can't be here today because she's in the classroom today, teaching. She says it best. Any country that out-educates us will out-compete us. It's a basic thing. And so, in the 21st century, does anybody think 12 years of education is enough to get you to, in the middle class, to be able to stay in it? I did a study for the president. He asked me to do a study on jobs of the future. Second to last year before we were out. 6 in 10 jobs this moment require something beyond a high school degree. 6 in 10. We've got to make sure every child has access to a good education, regardless of their zip code. That's why as Rosemary mentioned, my plan triples Title I funding for stressed at-risk schools. We can afford to do that. It goes from $15 to $45 billion. It means every child will have access to universal pre-K. And what you know up here, pre-K exponentially increases the prospect that child, no matter what their background is going to finish school and go through it without getting in trouble, either with the law or anything else. And it means we're going to finally pay teachers the salaries they deserve. You know, teachers and social workers graduating from school, whether it's at the U or wherever it is, they graduate in a four-year degree. They get paid less than anybody else graduating as a starting and finishing salary. Look, the work we do is of extreme national importance. Their salaries reflect that. We know that the 21st century, as I said, 12 years is not enough. Under my plan, everyone who qualifies to go to community college is going to be able to go for free. And you say, well, there goes that big spending Democrat, right? Well, guess what? It costs $6 billion a year to send every qualified person who's going from high school to community college or having to be retrained and going back to community college because they lost a job because of digitalization and Moore's Law and artificial intelligence. And guess what? $6 billion, a lot of money. We eliminate one tax loophole. It's called stepped-up basis. There are $1.6 trillion in loopholes in the tax code. 1.6 trillion, not the tax cut, the tax code. You get a deduction for racehorses. Eliminate one of them. It's called stepped-up basis. You're about to go and cash in a capital gain. You, figuratively speaking, get hit by a truck. You lose your life. It gets left to your son or daughter. They don't pay a cent. It's not a heritage tax. It was a tax owed 10 seconds before you got hit. Well, guess what? That costs $17 billion a year. Eliminate that one loophole to put every single solitary person in community college who's qualified. Increasing the productivity in this country 2%. Young people are getting crushed by the burden of student debt. Many of you parents are as well. If you're paying back student loans through this, they call it income-based repayment, my plan is to cut your payments in half. The way you do it, if you get out of school and you're making less than $25 a year to start with, you don't pay anything back and no interest accrues. You still owe it. And if you make more than that, you're only going to pay 5% of your disposable income, meaning after all your bills are paid and all your cost of living is involved. And if you commit to national service, you're a teacher, a paramedic, police officer, counseling victims, domestic violence, anything involving public service, you get $10,000 a year that you work off your debt, up to $50,000, and after 10 years of doing it, you have no debt at all if it's beyond 50. That's what we're going to do. And by the way, community college, you know, every community college in this state, if you do well in the community college, you get to go on to a four-year college. All those credits are transferable to a four-year state school. You got some great state universities in this state. Penn State's not doing bad, are they? And you know, if you're going to restore the middle class, we need to start to reward work again, not just wealth. Right now, under the Republican and the Trump plan, we only reward wealth. You know, Donald Trump inherited a strong economy from Barack and me. Things were beginning to really move. And just like everything else he's inherited, he's in the midst of squandering it. Squandering it. We need to build an economy. We need to build an economy that, in fact, rewards work, not just wealth. It reflects our values. And that's going to start, I'm going to start by reversing the Trump tax cuts for the super wealthy and corporations. Wealthy didn't need them in the first place. And corporations have spent them on stock buybacks to give benefits to their stockholders, but more importantly to their CEOs. You know, it used to be when Reagan was president, the average CEO of the Fortune 500 companies made 36 or 37 times what the average employee made, from vice president all the way down. You know what it is today? Over 420 times as much. What happened? As my mother would say, who died and left them boss? When did this? No, I'm serious. I think corporations can do a lot of good things. But I tell you what, they don't need their tax cut reduced to 30% to 20%. I think it should go back up to 28% instead of 39%. We'll raise billions of dollars to be able to put it on education, climate change, and the rest. I'm getting rid of the super wealthy tax loopholes, doubling their capital gains. Right now, if you're a fireman and a school teacher, or you work as a police officer or a nurse, you pay at a higher tax rate than someone making $10 million a year. Higher tax rate. Why is that? It makes no sense. Why should your capital gain be at 21%? And even then, most don't pay that. When you're paying at 28, 30, 32, 30%. So every single solitary person, their capital gains are going to be treated like real income, and they're going to pay 40% of their capital gains on their capital gains tax. It's a basic bargain to rebuild a stronger, inclusive middle class. And it doesn't affect any gains on your home and all those things that you, in fact, are able to take advantage of. And look, we got to stop this awful gun violence that's ripping us apart. Yes. This is one of the biggest fears children are facing. We can't live with ourselves if we don't take it on. I'm the only one in the United States of America who's ever taken on the NRA nationally and beaten them twice. We succeeded in banning assault weapons for 10 years and limiting the size of magazines. How many cartridges can be in a magazine? I know what it takes to get it done, and I can do it again. And fifthly, we got to confront the existential threat of climate change. It is the issue facing the world. You know, the United States accounts for about 15% of the climate change problems. We have to lead by example. And I've laid out a plan where we get to net zero emissions by 2050, and between now and 2030, we make such dramatic change that it can't be turned around. But 85% of the problem comes from beyond our borders. We need a president who can marshal those other nations to confront the greatest threat that we've ever seen to humanity. That's not hyperbole, it's real. The first thing I'll do as president is rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, which I helped put together as the president. And in the first 100 days of my presidency, I will invite the 173 other nations that are part of this to Washington, D.C., so they up the ante of what they promised they're going to do and hold them accountable. We have lost the respect of nations around the world by the way this president has acted. Climate isn't just an existential threat. Handled right, it's an extraordinary opportunity. You know, the uniqueness of America has been that we're the only nation in the world confronted with a real serious problem. We've always been able to take it and turn it into an opportunity. That's who we are in the United States. We can build a network of charging stations across America. So by adding 500,000 of them and move to all electric vehicles by 2020, reducing carbon by an enormous amount. We have ambitious plans for standards for buildings, cars, power grids. We're going to save you money, save you opportunity, and allow you to breathe cleaner. We're going to make an historic investment in clean energy research and technology, investing $400 billion in the industries of the future so we become a net exporter of all this technology, creating literally millions of jobs. It'll create more than 10 million good-paying jobs, union jobs, making $40 an hour, not $15 an hour. For real, this is the projection. The things I'm talking about, these are really big challenges, but they're no bigger than our capacity as Americans. So we have to get started thinking big again, thinking about the future we can build. Americans are doing their part. They're out there working hard every day. They deserve their leaders to work as hard for them. We don't deserve a Department of Education that crusades against public schools. We don't deserve a Department of Labor that puts corporate profits ahead of working class people and corporations on the board. We don't deserve a foreign policy based on lies, conspiracies, and theories, and abandoning our friends. And most of all, we don't deserve a president who goes out of his way to make life in America harder, crueler, pettier. He said he's working for the forgotten American. Well, he forgot about the forgotten American. The American middle class brings dignity and integrity every day to work. They deserve the dignity and integrity reflected in their leaders. The challenges we face are really serious. But I stand here more optimistic than I was when I got elected as a 29-year-old kid to the United States Senate. I wasn't old enough to be sworn in when I got elected. I had to wait 17 days to be eligible. No, really. And I was characterized as the young, idealistic guy who was optimistic. Well, folks, we have to restore our backbone of this nation. We have to remember who the hell we are. This is the United States of America. Think about this. I'm more optimistic than I've ever been in my career if we move this administration out of the way. We have the most productive workers in the world. Our workers are 3 times as productive, as a matter of fact, than they are in Asia. We have more great research universities in Pennsylvania and the United States of America than all the rest of the world combined. The rest of the world combined. Every major life-changing thing has come out of a research university monetized by corporate America. But it's come out of the research at the universities you own, whether it's Los Alamos or whether it's any other place in the country. We're in a position where we're the wealthiest country in the world. The wealthiest country in the history of the world. Why in God's name are we walking around with our heads down? We have the most powerful military in the history of the world. No hyperbole. And we've led the world not just by the example of our power, but the power of our example. And it's being eroded. The embrace of dictators and thugs. Kim Jong-un, love letters. A guy who had his uncle's brain. No, literally, had his uncle's brains blown out, sitting across the table. His brother assassinated by poison in an airport. Putin, who I know relatively well. I've spent a lot of time with him. Putin, who has nothing in mind other than to break up NATO, reduce our influence around the world, break down democracy. The one thing he fears is democracy. The embrace of the people that he has encouraged and poking their fingers in the eye of our allies, treating NATO like it's a protection racket. Unless you pay more money, we're not going to keep our sacred commitment that an attack on one is an attack on all. I could go on. You saw what just happened. I've been all through that part of the world where the Kurds are. I spent a lot of time in Turkey, significant amount of time in Iraq and that whole area in Syria. What have we just done? Have you found a single military person who doesn't feel like we have just besmirched America's reputation around the world of being reliable? 10,000 Kurds died defeating ISIS, capturing 10,000 ISIS terrorists in prison. The president, on a whim, without the support of any of his military commanders, decides he's going to make a deal with Erdogan, who I know well, to move hundreds of American troops who are trainers for the Kurds, standing between the Kurds and the Turkish forces and want to wipe them out. And he pulls them out. You see on television women standing there holding their children under bombardment when our tanks are moving out. And our military is so ashamed they're leaving, throwing fruit at them, saying, "You've abandoned us. We're going to die." What the hell's going on? What's going on? Who's going to believe America's word as we give it? That's what a president does. He speaks for America. He keeps commitments. And then when they said all those prisoners are going to escape, he said, well, they're only going to go to Europe. They're not going to come to the United States. That's great, isn't it? That's great. What are our allies sitting there thinking? Folks, look. There's not a thing we can't do. We're better positioned than any nation in the world to own the 21st century. We can do it in a reasonable and quick way. We can unite this country. Because, folks, I'm tired of people, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, walking around with their heads down like, woe is me. Folks, This is the United States of America.
Stand up. Take it back. We can, in fact, do anything we set our mind to. This is the United States of America. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.